Shalom, Boker Tov. It's Riba Muna. We're recording live in Spot. It's January 7th, 2021. Can't believe it. It's, he can't believe it either. It's Kaf Gimel Tevet, Hatafshin Pei Aleph. And before we start today's class on, sure. Yeah, sure. Is this good? On my dress? No, thank you so much. Let's see, is that good? Okay. So before we start today's class, which is on Parashat Shemot, and names, and the origin of names, and what are names in Torah, I just would like to say a few words because it is the yortzeit of my Rav, Rav Elazar Mordechai ben Gedaliahu Aharon, Harav Koenig, and it's his second yortzeit today.
Wow.
And he was the Breslov, the head of the Breslov Kehila here in Tzfat. Although the Lubavitcher Rebbe, when he met him, somebody introduced him as the Breslover Rebbe of Tzfat, and the Rebbe said, no, he's the Breslover Rebbe of the whole world.
Wow.
Mamash.
Wow.
His father was Harav Gedalia, who is really dedicated his entire life to coming back to Tzfat and to building Tzfat and to really mamash restoring Torah in Tzfat and building chadalim and building communities and mikvahs and
He did a great job.
yeah, he did. He did. And maybe I'll just say like a few words about the Rev and then we'll start. I met the Rev because I saw his picture in Danny Brock's house, and I was just so taken by the picture. It was so beautiful, and I asked, who is this man? And he said, oh, he lives here, and he's the Breslov Rav of Tzfat. I mean, nothing I could say right now is going to, really do justice to who he is. If anybody is interested, his Zion is here in the new cemetery, right across from Pinchas ben Yair. There's a big tree there, and people circle around and tie material or whatever, tie tichels onto the tree, and he's exactly right next to that tree. And just to say that he dedicated his whole life and every moment to being in service of Am Yisrael. I personally had many stories personally of him guiding my soul very deeply. Yeah, I know, you feel it. So I'll just say one quick story about him that I don't even know the name, but he suffered from terrible lung disease. It was very difficult for him to breathe. And he was on a waiting list for many years to get a lung transplant. And he was in New York, waiting, and one Friday night, his gabbai got a phone call, and it was mamish on Shabbos, and it was like a really unbelievable ness and unbelievable story. Hi. And basically what happened was there was like a homecoming football game, and the captain of the team was like this star athlete, 17 years old, and just like a brilliant athlete and in prime of life. And they lost the game, and he committed suicide. And immediately after it happened, it was like within moments really, they pushed the Rav up to the top of the list because they really recognized him as a holy man. I mean, it never should have happened, so to speak, because he was in his 60s, and they don't usually do that.
Wow.
But they were so taken by what a holy man he was, that he'd been waiting for months and months in the hospital. And it all went down on Shabbos, and he received a lung transplant from this 17-year-old athlete. I might add, not in the most beautiful way, I might add a non-Jewish athlete. And his parents, you know, one can only imagine, were unbelievably honored to meet Rav Koenig and meet, you know, this tzaddik whose life was sustained and maintained by receiving, and I mean, not just any lung, but like lungs of like a star athlete. But he did still continue to fight for his breath for many, many years afterwards, and continued to receive the kahal with, I mean, I myself can say with tremendous embarrassment that I sat before him crying about my children and my soulmate, and in front of a person who was literally gasping for their next breath. I mean, that's how self-absorbed I was. But he, I guess, was used to it from many of us. And his face would just shine, and I could say much more, but I guess I would say the last time that I had the merit of seeing him, he told me a story. The last time I saw him, it was right before Sukkot, 2 years ago, and he told me a story that he was so, well, let me just tell you two little backstories, and that is, as many of you know, I'm a single mother with 2 daughters that I raised on my own. Although it's probably proper also to thank my ex-husband for all the support in the various different ways. But he would tell my daughter, my older daughter, he would always tell her that she was a navon, that she was brilliant, and he would have her bring him her report cards, mamash like a zaidi, and he would sit and he would go over every single subject and ask her questions, and why do you like this and why do you like that, and I think you could be, and it was always this perfect balance of tiferet, because he would give her like so much praise, but he would also say like you're too smart to get this grade, like what happened here, and he would really, and for years and years and years, including into right before he was niftar, the last time that I saw him, the very first thing when I walked into his room was the first thing out of his mouth was he would ask about my children. And there's so much more that I could say, but I think that the 2 things that struck me the most was that he would go over her report cards with her. And the very last time I saw him, he was literally gasping for air, even though he had had the lung transplant. There's still, you know, the immune system doesn't always fully absorb the organ, and he was on tremendous amounts of medication. And right after he asked about my children, he asked if I had enough money and food for Sukkot.
Wow.
And I assured him that I did. But he got up and he went and he brought me these like prepaid credit cards and just handed me a whole bunch of these prepaid credit cards. And I told him at the time I didn't feel like I had the strength to go on. And he gave me a bracha to teach Torah. And he began to pound on the table. And I knew him for approximately 20 years. I'd never seen something like this. I think that he knew that he was leaving. And he began to pound on the table and sing to me. Yeshin yanshef shalahitapech hakol letova. And he began to sing, Ein shu yeush ba'olam klal, that there is no such thing as despair in the world. That's the last time I saw him. But we know that a tzaddik is even greater after they leave their body, because they're no longer limited by their finite body, and it's the light, which will perfect transition into our class today, into the power of a name. And I'm positive that he intervened for my daughter in finding her soulmate, and I'm sure he's intervening all of Tzfat, because this was really the continuation of his father's life work, which was to really build the community of Tzfat. And he suffered terrible humiliation, terrible slander and shame, and it just reminds me of something that I saw in the piece of Torah from Reb Shlomo last week, and Shlomo said, if you don't want to do anything in this world, then nobody will bother you, and everybody will like you. Mm-hmm. But if you want to do a little something in this world, you'll have a few enemies, and if you want to do great things in the world, you'll have great enemies. Mm-hmm. And I know that the Rav went through a tremendous amount, and was just constantly in love and constantly in service, constantly. And the last story, which I think is probably the most telling story, is that I was faced with a very, very big nisayon in my life, and I really knew that I didn't have the strength to pass this test, this spiritual test that was coming my way. And it was very clear to me what the right thing was to do, but it was also clear to me that I wasn't going to do the right thing. That I just didn't feel like I had it in me. And I went to the Rav, and I told him what was going on with me in my life, and that I knew what the right choice was, but that I knew that I wasn't going to make the right choice. And he mamish began to cry with me. And I just kept telling him, I'm not going to pass this test. I'm not going to pass this test. And he just was filled with compassion, and he just looked at me and he said, I don't know why, they're making it so hard for you in Shemayim, but be strong, and I'm davening for you. Thank you. And B'sofo shel davar, I actually did not pass the test. But I knew that he was crying with me all along. And that just meant so much to me. And I went and I told him I didn't pass the test. But it didn't change his love for me at all. In fact, if anything, I just saw a tremendous compassion from him. So anyway, may his neshama go from strength to strength. And all his love that he poured into all of us was such absolute devotion and mesirut nefesh. And may we all continue to build the community in peace, in holiness, in humbleness. And okay. So here we are, Parashat Shemot, and Sefer Shemot. So we're beginning a new Sefer. And as we mentioned, I think last week, it gets translated into English as Exodus, right, which is Geulah, when in fact the literal translation is names, right, Shemot, from the word Shem, right? So really the essence of what this whole Sefer is about is the power of names. And we're going to keep seeing this again and again. And by names, we don't just mean names of people to be sure, names of God. There's going to be a huge theme in this whole Sefer. And in even names of places. So like as we go through our 42 journeys through the Midbar, each place is really reflecting a state of consciousness on the spiritual journey as well as a physical place. But the names are reflective of where we are in our body-mind journey, in our soul journey and heart journey. And even more than that, it's really to call to our attention that every single thing in the world, every creation, is really a combination of Hebrew letters, and specifically Hebrew letters, as they are vessels and channels, God bless you, of the Or Ein Sof, of divine light, or we call light. Light is interchangeable with energy, consciousness, awareness, and so we'll just kind of give like just an overview of why the whole book is called the Book of Names in essence, and then just to say also like really the entire Torah is we know is black fire written on white fire, right? Which is essentially Hebrew letters and the spaces between them. And it's always about creation and then the space between. The space between is as significant and sometimes even more significant than the vessels themselves. And we're going to see this coming up again and again and again in these parshiot. And we'll give an example of like we're going to come to the Mishkan and we're going to get to the Kruvim, right? The angels, the little boy and the little girl angel, and then that the Shekhinah, or the presence of God, the indwelling presence that we each feel and experience within ourselves and share with one another, and it becomes really like a third piece in our relationship, right? It's like there's me and there's you, and then there's what happens in the space between us, the energy that's created when our energies blend and meet up, right? Which is also, we call that also Shekhinah. And sorry, it's really cold. So we'll begin from the beginning. We'll just give a little background on what is a name, why is a name, right? But what I was going to say before is that this black fire with white fire is that the whole Torah is essentially a flow of letters. And Chazal say that, the Christians talk about the New Testament, right? A Brit Chadash. And actually that comes from Yeshayahu. It comes from the Torah, this idea of a Brit Chadash, because it says there will be a Brit Chadash. And the way we understand this as being a Brit Chadash is to say that it's this flow of energy, these Hebrew letters, but where we almost where we put the spaces changes how the energy gels, so to speak, right? In other words, it's a flow of light and consciousness, but where we cut, to make a word, then takes that and brings it into Olam of Asiyah, or manifests it into concrete, tangible matter or reality, right? And so essentially we're like dipping in to the cosmic, wave of all light, of all potential, and then we're kind of pulling out a particle, from the lens of like quantum physics, right? And so it's the same with that. The Torah is this wave of letters, and the Brit Chadash will be the same wave and energies, but where we where we cut and make the differentiations changes what it looks like in a manifested level. Does that make sense, kind of what I'm saying? Okay, so we'll begin by saying that to speak something is to create it, right? So that when we say it, when we began in Bereshit, and it said, "Vayomer Elokim vayihi o," when Hashem said, "Let there be light," and then there was light, right? So that the letters themselves become the atomic structure of anything, right? The Hebrew letters themselves, so that while we might think, for example, in beautiful little Riva Bracha, so Chazal teach us that actually when we name our children in Pinchas, we're actually revealing their name. We're not finding their, in other words, their name, they were created, he was created with the letters Pei, Nun, Chet. Samech, she was created with the letters Resh, Yud, Bet, He, etc. And that a parent and the parents receive nevuah and prophecy to reveal the essence of the letters that this child was created with. Right? So, and so much so that even if a person says, well, I already knew what the, I know. And even if the person already knew what the name was going to be, because let's say they're naming after a grandparent or whatever, that's also all part of the hashgacha pratit of when they're created, so that at the b'sha'at zivug, at the time of the physical union, the energy that is coming down and is being created is a particular flow of letters, and that there's always a flow of letters, and sometimes those letters will then descend into the next level of the unfolding of the Seder Hishtalshalu, so the unfolding of the creative process, and the letters and the energies will descend, so to speak, and by descend we mean come from a very refined states of thought consciousness, right, or even higher than that is a state of will consciousness, right, like even higher than our thought is a layer of will, because by thought I can define sometimes why I want something, or I like something, or I'm attracted to something. But on the level of will, we say in Chassidus that lamala mita'am v'da'at, right? It's above even conscious, it's above conscious thought, so it's above my ability to explain why I'm drawn to this thing, right? We might call it in psychology like a superconscious, right? So will comes from such a hidden place. It's like place that's like, we call it a ma'amal satum. And again, notice that we're again referring to letters and speech. A ma'amal satum is hidden speech. The letters that are hidden even from us, right? So it's that place where we want something, but it's not even clear to us consciously why we want it. It's like mamish coming straight from the Or Ein Sof. So in every zivug, there is a flow of divine letters, always. But sometimes it will come down and descend into a physical body and take form in a physical body. But every time there's a zivug between a man and a woman, there is a flow of letters every time. And that's, remember, we were saying that flow goes into and is held in the ketubah, or the wedding contract of the woman. And then that energy actually sustains her and sustains their connection, right? Which is why, God forbid, if it comes to a place where people have to get divorced, we give a get, or we give a divorce contract, and again, written in Hebrew letters, because it's homeopathic. It's that the letters of the get have to slice the letters of the ketubah to release the energetic bond between the two people, and to release the souls from their soul contract. I hope that made sense. Okay, so but on the positive side, to say that in the ketubah, the letters in the ketubah, in the wedding contract, remain containers, the same as the letters in the mezuzah of our homes also hold the energy, everything that's going on in the house, from the level of will into thought and speech and action, because again, we're saying that everything is energy on different vibrational levels, different levels of light, so different sound vibrations, different color vibrations, but it's all energy, and it's all one energy, which is, we call it God. Again, we'll see in Sefer Shemot that even God has many different names, and it's not because there's ever a change in God, but the names of God are reflective to us of an experience that we are having with God right now. So these letters and names, it's always about names, right? If you pass in and out any door other than like a bathroom door, any door where people dwell, so you'll see Shaddai, right? Shin, Daled, Yud, which, by the way, is it's very beautiful when you pass there and take a moment to think about that. The name of God Shaddai comes from Shaddayim, from breasts, and it's actually the name of Hashem that is connected to Yesod. So it's the name of God that nurses us like a nursing mother. So it's like when we pass through a door and we give this little kiss, and it's also a reminder. There's many meditations of passing through a mezuzah, but one of them is that Hashem is constantly nursing, providing all my needs, right? Physically, spiritually, emotionally, and that no matter the transitions in life, because remember the mezuzahs are always placed at the doorpost, the place of transitioning from space to space, from consciousness to consciousness, right? And it's this reminder to me of, oh, Shaddai, right? Like, I am being sustained, I am being nursed, I'm being provided for. Even as I pass, let's say, from my home out into the street, and typically Reshut HaRabim, or the public space, is more frightening for people, right? You're less protected, you're more vulnerable to things that might come at you that, in your own home you might feel more protected, ideally. Okay, so let's go back and just begin by saying that speech and letters is what is the foundation of all of creation. And then we have the very first experience of naming, of right, where Adam names all the animals, right? So in Bereshit, Perek Bet, Pasuk Yintet, it goes into detail about Adam naming the animals. And what was this, we spoke about this before in other classes, but how did he name them? Remember, we said that he named them. I know to our ears this sounds very strange, but on a spiritual sense, it's saying that he knew them, he had da'at of them, which actually means that he actually had relations with all of them, right? Again, understand this is before Torah was given. This is when we were creatures on an entirely different level of consciousness. And this was part of his searching for his real soulmate. So the way that we understood it when we taught it in Parashat Bereshit is that it's also really mirroring his own spiritual evolution that he himself is still holding on an animalistic level, right? Until he goes through this whole process of finding out what he's not, if that makes sense, right? Like, he's not a lion, he's not a deer, he's not, right? And he's trying to find out what he is, what he is, right? And he goes through this process, and the Torah is really clear, and it's really beautiful that it says, and these are the names of the animals until this day, until this time, right? That it's that whatever names that Adam revealed, these are the same names till this day. Because essentially what he did was he experienced the very mahut, the very essence of each creature, And then he was able to, it's not like he made up a name. Again, what he did was identify and experience and reveal its true nature. In other words, what are the components of its essence, right? What qualities are the essential qualities of this creation? And by qualities, we're also always talking about, and we're going to see in a moment, much like Chinese medicine, it's the same in Kabbalah, that everything is rooted also in the elements of earth and water and air and fire. In Chinese, we also have metal. We do see metal showing up in Torah, but in the Mishkan, not specifically in Chassidut. And those elements themselves share qualities, right? Like, we'll just say sort of quickly, like when we have the qualities of earth, so we have the qualities of stability, we have the qualities of groundedness, because it is the ground. We have a quality of being more connected to the material world, right? As opposed to like a very mental world or an emotional world. This is a world of action. So when the earth element gives us like the idea of sinking our hands, into the earth, planting, doing, right? Being in very close contact with this realm of reality. And then we have always the shadow side of any element. So like the shadow side of earthiness is sometimes laziness, very slow, and sadness, depression, because again it's very earthy, so it's very heavy, right? It's not like a little fairy flying up, right? Mm-hmm. And we have the quality of materialistic pleasures also, right? So that when you have, let's say, like the sign of Taurus, rules money. Capricorn rules banks, right? It's this idea of, okay, so that's just one example, and we'll just say quickly, like we have the earth signs, and then we have the air signs. So the air signs are going to be, thoughts, speech moving through the air. So communication, right? The mental body. Spirituality, but again, spirit, because as I speak, literally spirit is coming out of me in the form of letters, traveling to you, and you're in receipt of that, right? So there's communication. So air signs are all about communicating and sharing information, and the intellect and thoughts, because again, thoughts, even in this moment, thoughts are flying in the air all around us every moment, especially now with technology. To just say a little piece about that, the Rebbe would. It started with the Friedeker Rebbe, right? The Rebbe's father-in-law, and when he first came to America, it sounds funny, but it was very serious. That he spoke about a campaign to purify the air, right? To say Tehillim specifically, and Mishnayot specifically, because Mishnah is the same letters as the word neshama, breath. Mm-hmm. So to use the Mishnah, the Mishnayot, to fix the air. And again, that sensitivity of understanding that the letters are in this moment, right, all floating through the air around us, waves of light and sound, right? And we are influenced by the quality of that vibration. Right? We all know that. We've been in places where we're like, ooh, this has great energy, and the opposite, right? So that's air signs. And then again, the shadow of the air signs, a certain detachment, a certain coldness, right? Because it's like being in a mental body as opposed to being rooted in the heart, right? Being very, very chatty and maybe not being conscious and aware of our speech and the power that it has and what we're sending out into the universe as we talk. So Lashon Hara, things like that, things like, infecting and affecting the air. And then again, like we're speaking something, and the awareness that another person, like let's say we speak Lashon Hara, we speak negatively about ourselves and others, and the awareness that someone else then is going to breathe that air in and be affected by it, maybe even on a level of their actual lungs, and this sensitivity and awareness that we're all one and we're passing information, feelings, thoughts through the air all the time to each other, so that we think again and again before we share information and speech, that understand those airwaves and sound waves and light waves keep traveling for infinity, right? And so their effect. So when we come into a space and saying Tehillim or filling the space with names of God, and by names again we're talking about channeling light and consciousness through vessels, through different shapes, how it comes down and the form that it comes down. In other words, the tzura, the shape of the sound wave, right? Because we know that sounds can have waves like this, and sounds could have wave like this, right? Vibrations. How that affects our chakras or our sefirot, our energy centers. How it responds in resonance with us or dissonance, right? So that the Frierdiker Rebbe would talk a lot about purifying the air, just saying, going anywhere and saying Tehillim and filling the air with awareness of spirit or God. I mean, it's all the same word, right? And then we have the fire element, and in its tikkun, tremendous hitlahavut or passion for devotion, devotional passion for God, warmth between us and other human beings, doing things in service of God in a very connected and present and loving way, right? So it's not like knocking it off, like, okay, I checked a V, I davened. It's to be in intimate connection and the feeling that we all have of warmth. What does warmth make us feel like? And then again we have fire kind of in its shadow side of arrogance, of anger, of rage, right? Fire. And then the last element that we have is water, and being very connected to the heart and emotion. It's a little counterintuitive, and I'm not going to get it. It will confuse all of you. But just to note that in Chassidut, water is connected to the brain, and fire is actually connected to the heart. But in the elements, it's the idea of emotion, and the flow of emotion, right? So water is always extremely sensitive. Yes, we know, Scorpio babies. And doing things in a connected heart way, different than fire though, right? Very flowing, and obviously the shadow of water is borderless, lacking borders, needing to learn how to make borders, maybe crossing other people's borders and letting our own borders be crossed, right? And impulsivity is a great quality of water, because it just goes and spreads wherever it's poured, right? So the reason I went into this is because we also have the same system in our body, and every Hebrew letter is deeply connected to one of these elements. So when we want to look at our name, it's another gateway in and another map, and we look at first and foremost the first letter of our name, because while all the letters are important and they're all going to give a soul print and a soul nigun and story of what our potential is, because that's really the name. The first letter of our Hebrew name is going to sort of give, much as in an astrological chart, we look at the planetary ruler of the whole chart. So there's like one planet that gives a flavor to your whole chart and your whole sort of life. And we do a similar thing in Kabbalah, where we look at the first letter of our Hebrew name and we first identify what element it is, right? So that we already, and then we'll look. I mean, these are layers and layers and layers. We're just like we always do. We're just building maps, right? So just to say that, and so Adam names the letters, right? And then we have this really famous Rashi, and it says that Adam names Chava, right, Isha, because she's taken from an Ish. And Rashi says there, it's really interesting, Rashi, and he says, and from this we know that the world was created with Lashon HaKodesh. From this we know that the world was created through Hebrew letters. The fact that he's an Ish and she comes out of him and she's an Isha. And this is like a very famous Rashi, that from here we know. So now, what does that mean? That the world was created with Hebrew letters. So we're saying that there is both a science and an art and consciousness maps of the descent of the flow of consciousness and energy into the world, and how it takes on form, and how it and by form we're always going to mean it's going to have limitations, right? And it's going to have qualities to the expression. Without, remember, we always say lights and vessels, lights and vessels. Without a vessel, we have no contact with consciousness or light, right? We need some way to be able to receive it, much like, I don't know anything about technology, but like a Wi-Fi signal, a radio signal, satellite signal. We need something to hold, tap into, and then it's always going to limit the information that we're getting so that it can be held and interpreted and felt and experienced. Yeah? Is that clear? Okay. So, so at the end of Shemona Esrei, right, we know that before we end Shemona Esrei, we say a pasuk, right? And if you guys don't know this, so we'll help you uncover it. But we say a pasuk of that begins with the first letter of our Hebrew name and ends with the last letter of our Hebrew name, right? So does anybody want to say their pasuk? Yeah.
My pasuk, Nachashati ben Yodei Nachashati ben Yodei V'yisiti Gaven Oil, and then Shoshana She'ui Bachem Kadosh Baruch.
Okay. So Chazal teach us that why do we need this pasuk? So I hope it's clear to the people who are watching on the video that I'll say it again, that it's a pasuk, or a sentence taken from Torah that begins with the same letter as the beginning of our Hebrew name and ends with the same letter as the ending of our Hebrew name. And Chazal say this astonishing thing, which is, wow, it's so hard for my brain to concentrate, which is that this is each person's soul code. It's your soul code. It's essentially the sound vibration of your soul journey. And so much so that it says that when we leave our body, right, so then, and our soul goes back up into being connected to the Ol Ein Sof, we don't remember who we were here, especially after the Kvura, especially after the burial. There is a space between the time when a person passes and they're buried, where Chazal tell us that the person does have consciousness, is still very connected energetically to this lifetime and these states of consciousness. But then once the body is buried into the ground, the person begins to process the life lessons and the experiences. Okay, so there is something, I don't know if you guys are familiar with this, because it comes from a different religion, although in its essence it actually comes from our religion, and that it's something called an Akashic record, right? Are you familiar with this?
What is it?
The Akashic records. Are you familiar? Okay, so essentially what the Akashic records are, the Akashic records exist. They're real. They exist largely in India. And essentially, it is the idea that everything that ever was, is, and will be is already energetically in existence and has already happened on a level of existence, right? Because again, it's just we have to allow our mind just to be very soft for a moment, right? This is a right brain type of experience. It's global and it's not linear. And the idea of the Akashic records, and people have gone. I read this, if anybody's interested in reading about them, I read a really beautiful book by Deepak Chopra on his search for his own personal Akashic record. And essentially, the Akashic people go to India and they look for these priests. It's a whole journey. And it's written even in the Akashic records when they will come to look for their Akashic record. Because it's the holding of all energy, of all that ever was and is and will be. So as I was learning and reading about these Akashic records, and I was so fascinated, and then I met somebody and they shared with me, yes, this comes from the Torah. The whole Torah is one Akashic record. That's what we were saying, black fire on white fire. And that the spaces themselves, Chazal learn out all kinds of both halacha and insights and midrashic insights, and from the white spaces in between, what's happening between these energies too. In other words, if you're having a conversation with somebody, there's what's being said, and often it's as important, if not more, what's not being said, right? Or what's energetically being transmitted, but it's not in the form of words. Those are the white spaces in Torah. So when there's like, suddenly we see Satum, and there's a big white space there. And sometimes the Torah skips 4 lines, and sometimes it's 1 line, and sometimes it's only the space of a few letters. That there's conversation, energetic interactions and conversations going on the level of above words, on the level of silence. Mm-hmm. But we know silence communicates a lot. Okay. So when I was researching for class, I was astonished to see, so I found this piece of Chazal that said, Mashiach will use our name when calling each person up for Tchiyat HaMetim. How they'll be called up is by the sound tone of their soul journey. So, Batya Bat Sarah, and, okay? And again, because if we understand it as being the Akashic record or the holder of, and this is really profound, it's the holder of every will, thought, speech, action you've ever done or thought about doing or considered, right? It's those letters contain all energetic energy that flowed through you and that you created and that you danced with and that you worked with. And it becomes encoded in a particular, like you were playing before, sound vibrations and movement of light vibrations that is uniquely you. And that blew my mind when I saw that this is going to be the process of Tchiyat HaMetim. And that this, the reason that we, at the end of Shemot Esrei, I want to hurry because I want to do whoever's name is here who wants their name done. So I'll try to be fast and just maybe do this quickly. But that essentially what Chazal are teaching us here is that our name is mamash the key to unlocking our soul. If you want to know what a person's shlichut is, or your own, if you want to know what your mission is in the world, if you want to know what your challenges are, if you want to know what your gifts are, what your light is, right? The qualities of, again, what we're also being filtered through the elements, right, of water and earth and air and fire and the mixture and combination. So it's all in your name. I'll just try to go really quickly here and say that the word sefer, right, a book, is the same gematria, 340, as the word Shem, or name.
That's good.
It's good, right? There's a beautiful, Sarah Chava now lives in his house, but there's a beautiful man whose name is Michal Oxman, and he used to, he's a practitioner of Chinese medicine, and he used to live here in Svat. And after I gave birth to my second daughter, he was my practitioner, and he put some needles in, and I had this astonishing experience where I literally started to see my life flashing before my eyes, like they say it happens before you die, like just this, like pictures really, really fast. And I was like, whoa, Michal, what's going on? What happened? And he's like, and it happened to be right before Rosh Hashanah. And he said to me, okay, this idea of Torah, of being written and sealed in the book of life. He said, what do you think the book of life is? And I said, I don't know. And he said, this, our body is the Sefer HaChaim, because it stores and holds energetically everything we've ever thought, said, heard, felt, touched, tasted, all of it, right? Including on very, very refined levels of consciousness, of will, right? Subconscious and superconscious. It's all our body knows. I am a body worker, and I began to study body-based psychotherapy because I began to experience that when I would speak to people, there's a level of being in our head where we can still be in deep disconnection with our actual truth. Where we're describing things, we're talking about things, but we're not actually experiencing them, where the body doesn't lie. The body holds, we know this from PTSD, right? From post-traumatic stress disorder. The body remembers everything. The body has recorded. I did an experiment with someone. I really want to share this with you guys because it was one of the most powerful experiences of my life. A few months ago, a young woman came to me and she told me she was dating somebody and she wasn't sure if he was right for her or not. And like Hashem put this idea in my head and I said, could we try something? I'd never done it before. And she said, okay. And I said, close your eyes and just like sink in and breathe and blah, blah, blah. And I'm just going to tone his name and see what happens for you. And I'm just going to make up a name right now. Okay, I'm not going to say the real name. And let's say his name was Yaakov, right? And I just started to say to her, Yaakov, Yaakov, Yaakov. And her head started to go.
Wow.
And she started crying and crying and crying and crying. And she just allowed her body to remember and experience, because Rav Ginsburg teaches, and he didn't make this up, right? This is from Chassidus, that he teaches that we all know already the name of our soulmate. We know it. And this is another Torah, we've said this many times. There are particular days that if we go into a state of bitul, or nullified receiving of information, in other words, we're empty of expectation, we're empty of it needing to look a certain way or unfold a certain way, we can vibrationally remember, because the truth is we have a chelek Elohim ma'al mamash inside of us. We have a godly soul. The godly soul is infinite, so all the information is already encoded in us. We know everything. We remember everything. Now, the process of geula, right, is, well, there's so much to say. Okay, please may it come in the right words. So let's just again look at some Hebrew letters for one moment, because this is so important. And look at the Hebrew letters for the word galut, because this week we are descending into galut, into Mitzrayim, right? Not just in Parsha, but we live the Parsha, v'chai bahem, right? Lichyot im hazman, it's happening to us energetically. It's live, it's real, it's not a memory, it's not history, it's not, right? And we know, ein mukdam u'meuchar b'Torah, there's no chronological order in Torah, it's energetic waves, and they're continuing, and we circle around back to that energetic portal. We're experiencing everything that was experienced then, and was, and is, and will be. Okay, it's really important that we understand this, because we have descended into Mitzrayim this week, and we have been remembered this week to come out as well, right?
Wow.
Hallelujah. Okay, so this idea of, let's just look for a minute at this word galut, right? If you look at it, it's gal, right, in the plural, right? Like a gal and many gals is galut, right? What is a gal?
Wait.
A gimel lamed, yes, waves, right? It's a wave, as in a contraction, okay? And the gal is also, what's a galgal?
It's a wheel.
It's a wheel, it's a circle. We have this in many religions, the idea of a karmic wheel, right? We call it samskaras in India, right? We call it, it's the idea of the karmic patterns and being stuck, right? And we have it in psychology, a repetition compulsion, reliving my same story, choosing the same guy. He just has a different name, but it's the same story, right? Again and again and again and again, right? Because my soul is yearning for something to get realigned, and I'm not quite sure consciously, right? How I know my body remembers that something got wounded. My body remembers that something is off. And so I'm compulsively looking for that person again and again so that I can fix the story.
Whoa.
Right? I'm actually trying to fix the story. So I keep choosing the same mistake. What we call in psychology, repetition compulsion. I'll keep recreating the story, hoping this time that I'm going to have a different ending, right? Okay, so, but we do get there sometimes. So we have this idea of galut, of the gal, of the waves, right? And the galgal, the circular patterns, the circular karmic patterns, right? And then all of a sudden, we have the same word, but we stick an aleph in the middle. So we have galut, right, or goel, and we put an aleph, and then we get geula, right? So all of a sudden, this thing that's going round and round in cycles of suffering and cycles of repeating like what? I was like, sure I wasn't going to choose this again, but yet I did, right? And again and again and again, and suddenly we infuse an aleph into the middle of it, and everything opens, and everything changes, right? So what's the aleph? What is this energy that's being infused in the middle of the galut, of these waves, cyclical cycles of suffering, and stories, the story that I tell myself of who I am. So part of why I wanted so much to talk about names is because you just missed that Shem and Sefer is the same gematria, right? But Sefer is also what? Sipur. The story that I tell myself of what's possible for me, of who I am, what's possible in this lifetime, right? And often it's wrong. It's an old story. It's the galut, it's the gal, it's the wave of I reach a certain place and I'm like, nope, can't go higher than there. Nope, that's not me. I could never do that. I could never be that. I could never, right? And then bloop, back into the wave again, right? So here's another, it's just like you just fall in love with Hashem. Okay, so now we get to yet another layer, and we get to the word for soul. And not only the word for soul, but the word for breath. Neshama, right? Soul. Neshima, breath, right? And right in the middle, in the heart, what do we have? Shem. A name.
That's amazing.
Right? So the very essence of a soul and the very essence of our breath in the inside is the energetic code, right? Of the key to unlock who our neshama is our name. In other words, what flow of Hebrew letters, what flow of energy, what are the shapes, what are the qualities and elements, what are the order of the letters. So for example, you could have a person with the same Hebrew letters in their name, but the order of the Hishtal Shalut, it makes all the difference in the world. Does that make sense what I'm saying? Right? Like you can have Yisrael or Shiuel. It's the same letters, but the Seder Hishtal Shalut as it flows down is going to make all the difference in the energetic makeup and story and sounding. The same as music, right? You can have do, re, mi. That's not going to sound the same as re, mi, do, right? It's not going to be the same nigun. Okay. So I'll try to be fast here. So our name is our book. Our name is our story. Our name is our spiritual potential and our life mission. Now, when we want to know ever the mahut of a name in the Torah, whether it's a person or a place, or Hashem's name, we always look at the first time that name is ever mentioned, right? And we learn the very essence of that thing or that place or the quality of that creation by looking at the first time it appears in Torah. Again, each one of these things could be a class, but we'll just try to lay a map so that we can actually get into your names, please God, at least a little bit. And if we don't have time, I'm committed to doing another Zoom class at home today because I really want to get this out for you guys. Okay. It's very important also in Torah when we look at not only our own name, but we're ben or bat our parents. So to understand that, like, the three of you are sitting here, that there's you and the flow of you, and then how you flowed and created Elisheva, and then how Elisheva flowed and created Riva Bracha. But it's really all, like, if you look at her, Riva Bracha, she's you. She's you that went through a refining process of does that make sense? Like parts of you, both spiritual, emotional, biological, because it's all encoded inside of you, and passed to Elisheva, and then that went through a refining process, and then that went through a refining process. And so where we come from in Torah, and you'll see often, Mordechai ben Kish, right? Forgot his name, Ish Yamini. When we give the whole Seder Hishtalselus of the names, it's very, very significant because this is going to sound really weird, but it's essentially one person. Does that make sense? When we say we're one, we're really one. We really are one because it's been a refining process of that being passed to that, sifted through that, and then sifted through that. But it's like, imagine it homeopathically. And the really amazing thing, just to blow your mind for a moment, is that in homeopathy, the more you dilute something, the more potent it is. So for example, if I'm making a homeopathic remedy of coffee, for example, right? And I take a part of coffee and I mix it with 4 parts of water. And then I take that and I take 1/4 of that and I mix it with 4 parts of water. And then I take part of that, right? So that actually when I get like to times 100, where it's been diluted 100 times, that is actually a stronger remedy than 3 parts coffee and 1 part water. Does that make sense? It doesn't make sense in our brain because it's happening on energetic levels. But do you understand what I'm saying about the concept of homeopathy? The more something is diluted, the stronger it is homeopathically. The stronger it pierces our system and creates harmony and rebalancing in our system.
It's almost like a cleansing, it sounds like.
It's yes. Yes, it's having so much space of being mixed in with, if you want to call it H2O, but God, right? And other things, that it gets it almost to its purest energetic essence of what it is. That's why this is Shemot, is the book of names. It's the purification process that starts from Adam and Chava, and that's why do we spend so much time on lists and lists of names? And this one had this one, who had this one, who had this one, this one, this one, this one, this one. And then she had, she had, right? Every letter in Torah is teaching us volume. So why? Why spend 5 psukim going through this whole Seder Hishtalshelus of people and their children and their names? Because it's the story of the refining process of the sifting of all the energies, right? And the refining and the saving. I saved this not so much. This gets saved. This goes through. Do you understand what I'm saying? Okay, so one piece that I saw that blew my mind, just to give you an example about Yaakov and Israel, and was so beautiful, and it talked about how Yaakov from the Ekev, right, from being the heel, was, this is going to blow your mind. It blew my mind when I saw this inside. Was his initial responses to life were flight, to flee, to run. So he's called the heel as a hint that is psychologically the way that he dealt with trauma and pain was to run, right? He runs away from Rivka and Yitzhak's house. He doesn't like confrontation. He doesn't like conflict. He's a simple little sweet guy who sits in a tent and he learns. And he has to go through this whole process to become Yisrael. Why is he given that name? Fight, right? We know fight or flight. He goes from a whole process through his body of the flight, of like this being scared, to being able to stay and fight, right? And it says he's given the name Yisrael because he fought with man and God and he prevailed, right? So he goes through a name change as reflective of a whole psychological and biochemical too, change and transformation that he went through, right? And I'm saying biochemical because when he was in flight, his adrenal, what are they called again? Adrenal glands or whatever, right? Is running the show, and the cortisol, and he's, right, like filled with fear. And he literally goes through such a transformation that he becomes a warrior, right? So the name is also reflective of just the whole koma of the person. Sorry, I will really try to finish this quickly. And then to say again, wow, just we're going to see names. I mean, we're going to, please God, through each parsha talk more and more about this. But in this week's parsha, Moshe kills a Mitzri, right? Does anyone know how he killed him?
With the name of God.
Yes. He pronounced the Shem Hashem, and he immediately died. So there was no fighting, there was no, it's an energy vibration that separated his soul from his body. That's what it was, okay? So there's names and names and names. Sorry, just give me a second. Okay. So we'll just say two more quick things, and then we'll go into the actual names. And that is to say, we have a very strong Masorah, we have a very strong tradition in Torah that when somebody is ill, to add a name, right? And why do we add a name? Because we're giving them a new shlichut, we're giving them a new mission that will hopefully keep them on this planet, right? So it's again, like we can learn it out backwards, if you know what I'm saying. Like if we give a name to somebody because they're ill, then we're understanding that a name is life force, is energy, is a mission statement, right? And is a shlichut. Particularly when it comes to angels, their name and their mission is one and the same. So Raphael, his mission was to heal Avraham, right? It was very clear. It is that with us as well. The only difference is that with an angel, they have one shlichut. Every angel has one shlichut. And our shlichut can sometimes be, varied. But again, to say that when someone is really ill, right, the reason we change their name is because they have a karmic sound and a karmic story, and we can add letters to that and change the vibration. Does that make sense? Mm. And then change their destiny. Okay, so the last little piece is before we go into the actual names, hopefully. Okay. It's just to say that again, we had the word neshama, and inside the word neshama, we have the word Shem. Now, we are introduced this week to our star, our Geula star, whose name is, who's the guy who takes us out? Moshe. Switch around the letters of his name and you get Hashem,
Whoa.
the name, which is also Hashem. So we are literally calling God, we're saying that names are so vital that we literally call God the name. So that when we're saying everything is about names, we're not kidding. Because when we refer to Hashem all day long, Hashem, Baruch Hashem, what are we saying? Blessed is the name. Which name? What name? It's all about the name. Now, remember also with Moshe, so do you understand when we get Moshe, Mem Shin He, and we put Moshe looking at his mirrored reflection, what does he see when he looks in the mirror? He Shin Mem, Hashem. Moshe and Hashem, Panim El Panim, we say they communicated face to face because the letters of their names are mirrors. Right? Do you hear that? Mm-hmm. So he's the guy who's experiencing God, Panim El Panim, because it's a reflection. Of course he's the one who gives us Torah, because he's the inner reflection. Does that make sense? Okay. So he's showing up as a character in this book all about names, and his name is the name. That's his name, right? Moshe, the name, right? Okay. And yeah, that blew my mind too when I learned that. I was like, ooh, wow. And now, so just to bring it home about when we're starting Sefer Shemot, and to say that we all know this famous Chazal, right? That says that we were taken out of Galut, right? In the merit of three things. Anybody know the three things?
The names was one of them.
Yes, our names. Yes. Shonam, Levusham, and Shmotam, right? Our names, the way we dressed, and our language. Again, why? Why those things? Right? Just because to say that, to name something, again, is to capture its essential quality. What are the tchunot hanefesh? What are the gifts? What are the challenges? What is the light? What is the energy, right? So it's saying because we didn't change our name, what this is really saying is we didn't lose connection with our true self. As much as it was covered over with the patterns, what we said before, repetition, compulsion, repeating the same mistakes, right? Or telling myself a story about myself that isn't true. Again, we said sipur is the same gematria as Shem, as my name, right? Telling myself these stories. And by the way, God is also so into this whole week. Is like, Moshe's like, well, what's your name? I think they're meeting, right? Well, what's your name? And when Am Yisrael asks me, says Moshe, which is really the name, right? What's your name, God? What's the name I should tell them is coming to change things? And what's his answer? What's Hashem's answer? Eheyeh asher eheyeh, which is again a river of flowing reality. I will flow how I will flow. Right? It's going to unfold how it unfolds. Eheyeh asher eheyeh, which is, by the way, the name of Keter, right? Which is above time and space. It's above reality. But Moshe asks him for a name, right? And he says, okay, you need a name. In other words, you need an energy code to hold on to, a sound code, a vibration. Here it is. All reality flows through me. There is nothing outside of me. So whatever story you're telling yourself about your limitations of who you are, that is going to undergo a process now, I'm so sorry, of being smashed, ripped, smashed, burned, like whatever it takes to pierce the veil so that you remember who you are and what your true name is, right? And that's what we experience as galut. Whatever the veils are that tell us again and again the limits of our story, And we fall into that same place again and again and again and again. So the experience of birthing or geula is to add, what did we say, the aleph. So let's just take 1 second. What's an aleph? An aleph is for ol, for light. An aleph is for eheyeh, I will be what I will be, right? In aleph, we know that the essential mahut or quality of an aleph is to join shnei hafachim, right? There's a yud on the top, a yud, a backwards yud, so that again they're in opposition, right? They're mirror images. Moshe and Hashem, Moshe and Yoshua, masculine and feminine. This is what the aleph does. And the vav in between, the vav of the pathway. How can we join things that seem to be polar opposites? How can we join things that seem diametrically opposed, right? And this vav, by the way, is going to become Kriyat Yamsuf. It's always the path that opens in how do I join divergent things? How do I join divergent beliefs about myself, right? On the one hand, I see myself as this, but on the other hand, I see myself as that. Okay, fast. And just say, that pasuk, that's the end of Shemot Esrei that we say. So it says that this becomes, it's the Akashic record. Our name holds every energetic imprint that we've ever made on the world, in any lifetime, by the way, except obviously our name in this lifetime is going to be more specific to this what? Gilgul, which is, what's Gilgul?
Gal.
Same gal of Galut, right? The repeating cycles of my story, of what I say about myself, of what I say about others, of what I believe is possible, of who I believe God is, right? That's a Gilgul. To keep going around in the same energetic beliefs until the aleph creates an opening and I get some freedom to see it a different way, hold it a different way, believe it a different way, experience it a different way, right? This is the contractions that start to open me as all the old beliefs fall away to the side, right? This is literally the opening, the contractions of dilation, right? Okay, so this last thing, and that is okay, maybe we'll just move into the, yeah, okay. Yeah. Oh, sorry. I just want to say one more thing. I always say one more thing. And you guys know already it's not one more thing, okay? Just again, that Am Yisrael is that names are so deep that Hashem says, that Moshe taps into, they're going to ask me your name. Why are they going to ask the name? And by the way, who else asks about God's name? Paro. What's the name of your God? In other words, what are his energetic limitations, so to speak, right? What is the quality of this God, right? And we have reappearing on the scene after being hidden for months and months and months, the name Yud Kei Vav Kei coming back, right? Hold on, one more thing. And he says, in Perek Gimel, Pasuk Yudalid, Hashem says, Zeh Shmi Leolam, this is my name forever, V'zeh Zichri Ledor Vador, and this is my remembering from generation to generation, right? In other words, again, what is a name? It's movement, power, flow of energy. So that just maybe last quick two things. And that is, our name also consists of three things: the letters of our names, the vowels of our names, right, and and how we actually speak it. And the reason we say this is because we will often have in Torah, for example, with Yud Kei Vav Kei, it's written one way, so it says ktiv, it's written one way, but where our Masorah is to pronounce it a different way. So sometimes we also have hidden layers within our names, and you'll see this often in Torah, where it says ktiv, it's written like this, but that's not its inner essence. So it might appear to you on the outside like this, but inside the sound vibration is something different. Does that make sense, what we're saying? Okay, so it's a combination of the actual letters, which is the vessels holding the light and determining the shape of the movement. For example, if we had a yud, right? So the shape of the movement coming down would be like this, right? And we have the nikud, and the nikud is not less important. In fact, Chazal say it's more important than the letters, because the letter is a vessel, but the nikud gives the toning.
What's nikud mean?
The vowels, okay, underneath, so that you might have like a person whose name is Aleph Reish Yud, and they might be Ori or they might be Uri, right? So it's a difference. That's a different name. The sounding of it is a different name. And then we have again this last thing of Ktiv and Kri, right? How it's written and how it's pronounced. Okay. Okay, I think that's just like a good introduction. And
now the class begins.
you know me too well. Okay, so what we did was we collected names last week, and I think that I'm playing at a wedding tonight, please God.
Wow.
So my time is somewhat limited, but these are all the names that people submitted, and I really wanted to be able to go through, but let's just take one name to start with. And since it's your space, we'll start with you. Okay, so we began by saying that the first letter of your name and the quality of that letter, it's very similar, we said, to like an astrological chart, where it gives kind of a flavor of your whole chart, a particular planet, right? And by the way, every letter is also connected to a musical note, to a color,
Wow.
yep, to a planet. Well, Nicole's taking notes, so we'll say it again. Every Hebrew letter, because imagine a periodic table of elements, and that's essentially what every Hebrew letter is. So it has a quality of sound, a quality of movement, a quality of color, and then it's connected to an element, as in earth. Nobody would get this if you were not born in the 70s, but earth, wind, air, and fire. That's for me and you, I guess. Okay, so I'm going to start with here. מי ששמו מתחיל באות נון, חושיו מפותחים היטב. So a person whose name begins with the letter nun, his senses are very developed. Okay, we're going to say more. יש בו יצרים רבים וסוערים, and has this great passionate quality to your desires, right? Stormy is really the word we're looking for. Akshan umardan, now again, realize these are all parav. They're just qualities, and it's how we use them. We use them in service of Hashem, or chas v'shalom, the opposite, right? They're just qualities. There's no bad or good quality, right? So, akshan umardan, stubborn, rebellious. Okay, but stubborn and rebellious is a great quality when you have to hold on to truth, right? It's a great quality. Shomer muskamot, im yachkim yuchal להשיב תשובות לשאלות קשות ביותר. Don't I know it? And it says, if the person develops their wisdom skills, they're able to give answers to particularly challenging questions and situations. Tipus, this is nun. Tipus yashir v'ruchani me'od, with great integrity and very spiritual. Notel milchamot v'tzarot, can have an inclination for fighting, and I'm not even going to say that word. O she'ohavim oto, o she'sonim oto. It draws out a quality of people either love this person or don't like this person. Again, we're going to say more why. This is just an introduction. Matvei rucho mishtanim b'kitzoniut, extreme emotional spectrum, right? I would say that anyways, knowing you're a Scorpio.
I was going to say.
Al yedei sheyakabel harbe chom yuchol lishtanot. When this person receives great warmth, they can change greatly, like they really need a quality of warmth. Yachol lehagia le'amkut ruchanit gvoa, they can reach great spiritual depths. Yesh bo otzma rabba shemakrina svivo, the person has this, we all know, presence and strength that shines forth to the environment around them. Ve'i afshar lihiyot adish klapav. You can't be parav about this person, right? They're very impactful. Their energy is very impactful. Mitlahev me'od, they get very excited about things. Lif'amim shocheach et haderech eretz ha're'uya. Okay, they can be a little harif sometimes. Okay, so that's in general about the quality of the letter nun. Again, I mean, we could spend weeks on this, and if you guys want to, we will spend weeks on it. It's like up to you. Like, you know, I'm just about flow. So just to say another few things about the nun. So nun is one of the names of Mashiach. Yinon, right? Yinun, right? Nun Shmo, Yinun Shemo. So nun is Yinun is a letter. The letter nun always refers, like we have Nachshon ben Aminadav, right? It is the letter that rules the month of Cheshvan. Forgot to also say, there are 12 letters that rule the 12 astrological signs and the months. Other letters are connected to the Mishkan. We won't do all of it. We'll do as much as we can. Okay? So the quality of what we just said, this sort of kitzoniut, is the very quality of Mashiach. So the nun stands for Nachash. So we have the fallen Nachash, right? And by Nachash, we're always referring to the mind, right? Nachash has to do with, how did the Nachash get to Chava? Through her mind, right? It was not through action. It was not through, yes, she ate, but where he got her was in her mind, right? So it's the quality of using our koach medameh, or using our, I want you to hear this, I'm going to wait for you. It's the letter that rules Cheshvan, and I mean, I want to just give everybody a little taste of their names, but we could, like, for sure do a whole class and go deeper and do more. So this is the name Natali. Okay, so you have a nun, a tet, a lamed, and a yud. Again, it's very significant, each letter, and then in the order that they're coming down. Okay, so Natali boletet malchutit yoter mima shekadai la lachshov al atzma. Wow, he's harsh. I wouldn't say it that way. Okay, I'm gonna allow me to sweeten his words. So it's expressing great, which is we know this because it's connected to Beit Malchut, right, to Mashiach. This quality of Malchut, great Malchut. I'm not going to translate it the way he wrote it because I don't choose to do that. Yes. Nifga'at meher u'mechuna lehitpayes rak k'shazulat chazar bo bechol lev. Okay, I don't know if this is true or not. I'm just telling you what Chazal say. A quality of being easily hurt and offended, and is open to making up, but only if the person really, with their whole heart, is like sincere. But that's a great quality. I think that's a great quality. He atzma kashe la lehodot b'ta'ut You want me to read this out loud? Yeah. רגשנית, חמת מזג, או שאוהבים אותה או להפך. כמעט שאין ממוצע, וכך גם היא כלפי הבריות. Now that's beautiful, that's interesting, because it says that you yourself are a certain way, so it's being mirrored back to you, right? It says that she's somebody who either really likes somebody or not so much. Okay, טיפוס חסדן ואוהב לתת, right? A person filled with loving kindness, loves to give. אם רק יצליח הנזקק לכבוש את ליבה, וזה לא קשה כל כך. If you can conquer her heart, then she just loves to give and to love. אוהבת לנוע במחשבותיה והנהגותיה, וגם עם מקום מגוריה. A person who loves movement, both in thought and in action, and even where you live. אוהבת וזה מה טוב, I'm not reading that. פשוטה ולבבית. Simple and full of life and full of heart. Okay. You want to do the Devorah? Okay.
I feel my bow.
Yeah. Okay. So now we're just going to again say באופן כללי, anybody who, so the letter Daled stands for delet, a doorway, or dalut, to be lowly. So it's always a symbol of humility and humbleness. So for example, in the name Yehuda, right, we have Yud Kei Vav Kei, but we have a Daled right in the middle, right? So we have Yud He Vav and then a Daled and He. So we have his greatest quality is Hod, Hoda'ah, right? To acknowledge one's mistakes, to be humble, to admit, and to be full of gratitude and to thank. So this Ot Daled, Ha'ot Daled misamelet hachna'a v'dalut, right? Acknowledgement and humility. מי ששמו מתחיל בדלת יודע להכניע את עצמו ונוטה ללכת קדימה. A person whose name starts with a daled, she knows how to make herself humble, right? To take accountability. ונוטה ללכת קדימה, knows how to move forward. להשיג ולנצח, to reach the goals and to be victorious. לא מוותר בקלות, doesn't give up easily. נצרך לחום רב, needs a lot of love and warmth. חכם is very wise. עם חוש humor, has a great sense of humor. אוהב לעזור, loves to help. יש לו חוש אסתטי, has a very beautiful aesthetic sense.